Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome back. Um, okay, so we are actually getting pretty close to the end of the semester. How about that? With only like a little less than a month left. So anyway, so we are actually moving on to our last new topic, and hopefully this will be a more enjoyable one than I shouldn't say that, but this is actually one that actually is more for the creative writer, although it's not creative writing, so it's different. It's still reporting. It is feature writing. Yay! Now, what the topic I offer for this assignment is not going to be maybe the most exciting topic in the world, but you can make it exciting. It's all about what you make of it, right? So it's going to be about the weather. But let me first discuss to you about what feature writing is, okay? Um, but just remember that the data journalism assignment is due on Monday, which is when you'll see this video. And really, by now you probably should again check with me to let me know what you think, how many increases there have been over the last 5 years. Um, even check with me the numbers, I'll let you know. Okay. That's the gift I can provide you. Okay. So let's actually go to the shared screen here. And it's one of those days where it's moving slowly again. All right. So as you know, we have our modules here that go, we've been going over all this stuff. And then we moved into the second half of the semester. We dealt with public relations writing. That was the megalomania assignment, which everybody should have gotten back by now. I'm also going to actually provide you a little glimpse of what that was actually based on at the end of this videotape. So if you want to stick around for that, okay. Of course, data journalism, and we did our major assignment, okay. I should have all those proposals by now. And also remember that it's actually a full grade deduction if you don't have if you didn't have it on time, okay, the proposal. Okay, so feature news. Feature news, I have it right here. And actually, to be honest with you, I do have chapters that are connected to this topic, chapters 8 and 12 that I wanted you to read. But I feel like there's like some older material from older books that we've used that actually is probably better. Okay, so what's the big difference between feature news and the traditional news, the hard news that we have been doing all semester? Well, first of all, it's supposed to be what they call writing to be read. So I've been telling you all semesters, some of the stuff's going to basically, it's going to turn the stuff that I've told you on its head, essentially upside down a little bit, because I've been telling you, I got to get everything up high, got to get everything in the first graph, the whole thing. This is actually a story that's actually meant to be read from top to bottom. And there's other terms that could be used for it, such as like Sunday news stories, which back in the day, they actually had. First of all, you have basically what we've been doing essentially is our hard news stories. Okay. Um, okay, hard news. That's like your daily news stories. Okay. Um, Traditional news, that sort of thing. Now this is what you would call soft news. I don't know why I changed type there, or feature news, or Sunday news, because what happened back in the day was when they had the hard copy edition, the most read paper of the week was the Sunday newspaper. It was, you may remember, I don't know, you may have heard about it, and you still see it, but it's the thickest. When you see, if you look at it in the supermarket, or maybe you have it delivered at home, I don't know. Most people, almost everybody does online now, but it's the thickest paper of the week. It has the most advertising of the week. Still to this day, that's the actual traditional Dead Tree paper edition. Okay, and what they do is to try to fill out that paper, they have almost like magazine-ish type of stories, longer stories. And these stories don't necessarily have everything you need to know in the first paragraph. How about that? In fact, they don't. In fact, what they do is they essentially tease you with suspense typically, and then kind of lead you along into the story. Okay. Um, Much like more like a book would. How about that? Okay. So it's your Sunday news, feature news, soft news. That's what it is. Okay. You see a lot fewer of these stories nowadays. I call up the New York Times randomly here, and what you'll typically see, New York Times really takes pride in still being among the few papers that still do this. But if you call up the New York Times on a random day here, you'll see like the actual hard news, the daily news, stuff we've been doing already, typically at the top of the website. Okay. And I'm just waiting for it to appear here. I mean, you're going to see stuff about what Ukraine. You're going to see stuff about Trump. You're going to see, Michigan Democrats rise and try to turn a battleground blue. I mean, that could sometimes you actually put like somewhat feature stories at the top, but um, usually what you have to do is usually have to scroll down to see these truly personal stories, um, or feature stories that have like a softer approach to them, meaning that they have more description in them. Instead of just like reporting basically like the straight facts, the facts might also include not just like who, what, where, why, when, but the where becomes a little more important. What you see in front of you. Okay. You're writing about something that goes on at Rutgers. You want to write about like not necessarily like the things that people say, but maybe the atmosphere around them, because the atmosphere around them will affect them. It's called color. Okay. And what you'll have is essentially like maybe describe like the way the leaves look, the trees look, that sort of thing. I'm just kind of like flipping around here. We had this horrible instance here in Nashville. It's not necessarily just like it's not just the story that I mean, when I say softer news, it can still be based on a hard news angle. But what you typically see these stories is what they call sidebars. There's essentially you have the main story that basically identifies like what's going on, with the Nashville shooting, unfortunately. Designed to kind of hang this story, and you'll see advertising appear on the side, and the advertisers will be happy that you're seeing their advertising that you might not normally see. Now we're kind of focusing on one person here. Catherine Coons, the head of the school, had a zeal for learning and saw in students potential they did not see in themselves. You've got it, she would tell a struggling student. Mike Hill, a custodian, found fulfillment in work. Laura Bryce, the last name of the life family. That carefully built sense of security was punctured on Monday when an armed assailant breached the campus, opened fire at random students and staff members. Okay, the community surrounding the Covenant School was now wrestling with a horrifying reality. Dr. Coons, Dr. Mill, Dr. and Evelyn were all dead, as were two other 9-year-old students and a substitute teacher. Our hearts are completely broken. As investigators try to piece together a motive for the attack, authorities praise the actions of Nashville police officers. Okay. So what this is basically is kind of like, again, more of a feature-ish angle, and basically not just the shooting itself, but how this is. So it's actually a slice of that. It's a feature-ish angle on basically a very peaceful place, where essentially, and that basically is no longer peaceful. Okay, shadow, dreams, and paragraph by peaceful place, and then comes at you, which this is essentially called teases. And then it comes at you with this is called now suddenly this peaceful atmosphere is destroyed. Okay. So that's essentially a feature story, basically with a nut graph, the nut that basically tells you what the story is about. But first it brings you in with this kind of almost like this kind of like ironic sense of like the way things were. And now suddenly here are things now. Okay. And then basically kind of follows maybe a typical like, news story pattern. But like I said, it might get into more description. There'll be more pictures showing the atmosphere there as sadness. Even with the uncertainty over the motivated attack, the magnitude of the loss was clear as relatives, friends, and people who knew the victims expressed their grief. That's like essentially the first transition. Okay. So basically you have like, there's still uncertainty, and now people are now, once peaceful place is now grieving. And here are some of the people who are talking, who knows Strug's family struggled to wrap her head around the trauma that those close to the victim are now enduring. See, like the anecdotes, there's anecdotes in this story that come out that are become more important than the previous stories we've had, because you want to get deeper, you want to get emotional, you want to show that a kind of expression. Okay. I like to think a lot of times, and I want you to do this with this story, is that usually stories are really kind of better started with I like to think like one person and kind of reflecting on that one person's kind of dreams and hopes being shattered, that sort of thing, and then getting into a nut graph because then you can kind of dive deeper. Okay. Here's another example I actually provide here in the modules right here. This is actually an older story. It's about you might remember the Somali pirates a few years back, but and like how they created a lot of fear and panic and that sort of thing. Somali pirates kidnapped and held Michael Scott Moore, but this was actually a single story, a slice of that story. We're looking at Michael Scott Moore's experiences. Okay. Somali pirates kidnapped and held Scott Moore, a journalist, hostage for 2.5 terrifying years until a ransom payment secures release in 2014. And so basically, you're not learning everything you need to know in that story. You're just learning step by step the fear and panic that Moore is going through. 2 months later, Moore received a surprising message on Facebook. How are you, Michael? The message said, "I am your friend, Mike Muhammad Tahil. I'm sorry. I want to speak with you." It says, okay, that's just the way it was written. The sender's Facebook page included this photograph. What follows an extraordinary exchange of Facebook messages, and then suddenly it slams you with essentially the nut graph. So you basically kind of like decide not to write it back. You know, what's going to happen to him? It almost leaves you in suspense. Is something going to happen here? Something like crazy, violent, extreme, maybe the complete opposite of that, leaves you hanging in suspense. What follows an extraordinary exchange of Facebook message. Here's the nut graph between the journalist and the captor. Something surprising, not violent, nothing like that, but something sentimental, something emotional. How long they communicated and where the conversation ultimately led has not been made public, but in the summer, the Somali was taken into custody. Okay. All right. So what I have in the module essentially, and actually, yes, I also have a video which I'll eventually show you. I can also show you, but basically that's actually like how I can take basically information from a discussion point, which by the way, I posted for this story that I'm assigning to you, which I'll get to, and turn it into a feature story. Okay. So writing feature stories, so basically it's from an old textbook. Differentiating feature stories from news stories is misleading. The two actually have a great deal in common. The difference is emphasis. The styles that are commonly used for feature stories assume that the reader has more time to read. They still require a central theme, just that, like I said, usually that theme is a little more delayed. It kind of is brought along with suspense first, okay? The writer must be able to summarize the point of the story, but the writing may require that the reader go further, or I should say further, to fully understand the point of the story, okay? All right. Characteristics of feature writing. To the reader, the feature story seems to have more relaxed style of writing than a news story. It may be easier to read than a news story because of its context, may be more entertaining. You see a lot of these stories in the entertainment world. Feature writers, however, work just as hard or just as disciplined as news writers, okay? Newspapers used to have like whole departments of people writing these types of stories. And like I said, this is essentially what is the magazine type of style, okay? It's basically still a news story. It still has like the important stuff toward the top, but it's more of a delayed experience, more of a suspenseful, engaging. It's actually, not only being accurate, clear, and focused. You want to be engaging. You want to engage the reading and connect them and get them to read the whole damn thing. Okay. And then an old textbook actually shows some of the differences here. A traditional news lead here gives the who, what, where, why, when. It's also called a narrative lead, the feature lead. Describe a dramatic point in the story. I mean, it could be a story about like what led up to a murder or something like that. But like I said, it's not the actual breaking news story on a murder. It's maybe a follow-up to it or something. Then the nut paragraph, you give them the theme of the story. And then you provide typically like the supporting graphs that support the lead. Okay. The ending is essentially can end the same way. It can end with an anecdote, no conclusion. Okay. Maybe a quote, that sort of thing. Okay. I provide additional like stuff here, any materials basically, and how they could like, it's also called a narrative. Essentially, you're weaving a narrative together. A narrative basically telling kind of more of an in-depth story, more emotional, more feature, more color. Okay. All right. They carried knapsacks and bags to tote loot. They held a screwdriver to pry open doors and windows. They used latex gloves. You notice that there's paragraphs here that are short. That shows dramatic action. Okay. There's spaces there, kind of leaving it hanging on a cliff. They acted like professional criminals, but officials say they were teenage burglars coached and directed by a Palm woman whose son and daughter were part of the gang. This is the nut graph right here. But these 2 paragraphs, just 2, provide some sort of suspenseful, engaging, exciting way of getting in there, and almost ironic. There's always a lot of irony in these types of stories. And then they kind of recount a lot of the details that happened, but they provide more in depth to the details about why it happened. Okay. All right. There shows you some differences in the leads here. I provided here like an anecdotal lead, how that would differ from the straight lead. Again, this is actually in the modules itself. Okay. All right. So let's actually so I don't go way too long here. Let me show you actually what the assignment is. Okay. And please get this done on time. You only have like data journalism rewrite, which will also be posted by Monday. Okay. You'll be given a week on that. And then of course the feature news story, and then the major assignment, which again, I really strongly recommend that you show me like some sort of rough draft ahead of time. But again, I meant that I'm doing this ahead of time, so you're going to see it. But the data journalism rewrite will be posted. This is not posted yet as of this taping, but it will be the 6th assignment. We are doing a 500 800 word feature story, instructions for which are here. So I don't know, I felt like it was better to provide the instructions actually on a Microsoft Word doc that is actually here. Okay. So what I have here is, just try to find it. I'm sorry. There, not there. Right. Okay. So this is your features. This is your assignment. Okay. And I also provide an example. How about that, of a previous assignment that worked? It's due in 2 weeks, April 17th. And then there'll be a 1 week long rewrite after that. That'll precede the major assignment's due date. Okay. So for this assignment, you will write a 500 800 word story that will require you to flex your creative muscles. Okay. You're required to use an anecdotal lead, much like the one I described, and I'll show you more specifically in a bit. With a nut graph. These leads describe action in a narrative form, suspenseful, paragraph by paragraph, again, teasing you one piece at a time. And actually, I should show you actually how that works. Okay. So what I've showed you before essentially is this. I showed you essentially this kind of structure: lead, coming with a transition, and then an anecdote. Maybe you have 2 anecdotes in a row. I don't know. Quote, and then you go back to a transition. It's loosely like this. Okay. An anecdote, rinse, repeat, quote. Well, and this kind of difference here essentially is your lead. Okay. Your lead is still a lead, but it's more paragraphs, more engaging. Okay. And what I like to say is that lead is now actually a tease. Okay. A tease to get you to keep reading, maybe another tease, another paragraph to get you to keep reading. The Somali pirate story was actually like 3 teases. And then you have a nut graph that basically identifies what the story is about. A little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here. They were murderers. They looked like they were ready to kill people. They had masks on their face, but they were just dressed for Halloween. And they were among a growing number of people who were dressing for Halloween as burglars. That was the nut graph. So you almost like scare people into like this story. And then you go into follow the same format: transition, maybe an anecdote, maybe another anecdote. An anecdote again gets more descriptive, more personal, and then a quote, and then a transition, an anecdote, and then a quote. Okay. All right. So you make note, but again, one of the elements you may want to add is like, maybe you're interviewing somebody outside, and this is actually going to be a story about the weather. So you want to write about like what they're wearing. Okay. You wouldn't normally write that in a straight news story. You wouldn't write like they're wearing a coat in the middle of April or something. But maybe that is a little bit unusual because we've had some weird weather lately. Okay. We've had some weathers like we've had days where it's been like freaking freezing in the middle of the day, early day, and then suddenly it's warm at the end of the day. So you make notes of the details you see. What are people wearing? Is it cold outside? Can you see their breath? Is it raining? Do people look tired? Try to be funny. I mean, you want to stick factual. Okay. And maybe that can be borderline, because how do you judge whether somebody's tired? Maybe they're bent over, they're hunched over. Maybe they said they're tired. Maybe you can see their eyes kind of drooping, that sort of thing. Maybe they're red. You could try to even be a little bit funny and witty. Okay. We just did a story at my insurance magazine where I basically worked in the way, I know it's a little cliche, but it was a story about how how one insurance guy would assess damage in a like a Marvel action movie or Superman movie. It looks like looks like I'm kind of slowing down here. It's got to catch up. Hope you can still see me. Not sure what's going on here. Okay, I think I froze. All right. Anyway, so you know, the only way we were assessing like what happens in a Superman. Sorry, I'm reacting to the pinwheels I've been seeing, which is really annoying. You're basically reacting, and basically the story was about like what would the insurance assessment essentially be like if it really happened, if like a Superman was like all this destruction was happening, all this stuff. And I worked in faster than these premiums skyrocket faster than a speeding bullet. So you might be like a little witty like that, even though it's a little cliche. But so basically, like, here's like what would be typical like teases, okay, for a weather story. On Monday, Walter Scrubb wore sandals as he rode the bus. It was warm. That's your first paragraph. Next paragraph. On Tuesday, it was cold, but Scrubb was still wearing sandals. Why? I'm protesting the cold, he said. I hope God sees this, at least Mother Nature. Then you get into the nut graph, which explains what the story is about. And that basically, essentially, is going to be people, Strucker students, okay, you're going to interview people. You get into the nut graph anyway. Interview people about the weather and the changing of the seasons, how it's impacted them. And write a 500 to 800 words feature story on it. Talk to them about the weather and how they're adjusting. Describe the color of the leaves, the grass, the sky. Write a story about how people appreciate, don't appreciate this time of year. Are they going outside? What do they think about the cooler weather or even the warmer weather? Are they feeling better now that the vaccines are, okay. I always leave that in there. I mean, don't make this a COVID story, okay? I'm just saying that, like, that still is kind of like an issue for some people wearing masks, stuff like that. If you want to add that, but how about the commute, whether they're driving, taking the bus, or walking to class? But probably the one thing that affects students more than anything is what they wear. Okay, I know that affects me when I'm teaching class. I have an in-person class, and my room is always freezing, or it's always hot. So I have to actually really determine what the hell I'm wearing. And then, like, when you move around the campus and everything, you really got to determine what you're going to wear for that day, because are you going to like wear a sweater in a day and then suddenly you're going to have to like lug it around or a coat, and you have to lug around the rest of the day or tie it around your waist? I mean, these are actually very important matters to students, that, because it really kind of can affect your day. Some classrooms can be really hot, some can be really cold. All right, so that's why the weather matters. Okay. Important note, because I've done this story before, obviously, you can probably tell. Please don't make this a paper about climate change. I put that note in there because I've gotten too many times where I've had people who turn students into scientists. Okay. Now, look, I believe in climate change. I believe in global warming. I believe that's happening. It's unfortunate. It's terrible. But this is not a story about people assessing why the weather is the way it is. This is a story about how people are personally impacted by the weather. Okay. All right. So that's what you need to do. You need to have like transitions. Transition A, how are they specifically impacted, like when they go from class to class? Transition B, what are they doing to combat the changing of the seasons that seem to happen almost daily? Okay. C, how is it impacting their mood, their emotions, that sort of thing? That's what you want to look at, and have anecdotes, personal anecdotes to talk about. Okay. So anyway, yes, that's due April 17th. Let's look at actually back at here. And then I'm going to have a discussion point. I'm posting a discussion point that will basically like ask, and I want you to take off your reporter hat for this one and put on your source hat and basically provide those sorts of anecdotes and that sort of thing. This will be posted by Monday. If you actually call this up, you don't have to use these people. You can actually use just, anybody, maybe people you live with, or whatever, but they got to be Rutgers students. Okay. I didn't get a lot of participation in the data journalism thing. There were like, as of this videotaping, there were 4 people. So anyway, by the way, also, I also, this is off the point a little bit, but I said to you that if you wanted to provide a discussion point for your major assignment topic, I can provide that for you. I actually sent out that as a announcement. Somebody asked about, somebody's doing story on the Rutgers, possibly Rutgers faculty strike. And by the way, I'm still going to teach the rest of this semester, in case you're wondering about that. Okay. But anyway, this is going to be posted and pinned by Monday. How do you feel about the Rutgers weather? Okay, and then you'll provide answers to that. Okay, and please do that. I'm looking at class participation. Okay, and I make the note about the scientists here, climate change. We're not asking you to be a scientist. I want to know how you're personally affected by the weather, particularly the normal routines. Okay. There's also, I mean, I provide this actually within the modules itself, but I provide additional reading materials here. This is some of the stuff I showed you before. So you can look at that, provide it, help supplement what you have here. And like I said, I'll talk about chapters 8 and 12 too. And again, here's a video again, how I built the feature story from on the weather, from the ground up, using material, students' opinions from discussion points we had in prior classes. And then here's one that worked for people right here. There's a link right in your assignment, and it's from a guy named Jacob. Let's see what Jacob did here. Okay. Kenji Demarest. Yeah, that's what it looks like to get an A. I guess you've never seen it. Kenji Demarest, a Rutgers student, said the recent weather in New Jersey. I like to focus on one person. Okay. Focus on one person at the top. I've had people say like, 5 people are walking around campus looking weary and tired, blah, blah, blah. When you do that, you're kind of gleaning and it's too thin of a focus. And you can't really get that in-depth emotional reporting that you're and writing that you could get from looking at just one person at the start, and like you can on an anecdote. You're essentially taking an anecdote that might have like in the middle of the story, you're putting it at the top. That's what you're doing. Okay. So Kenji Demarest, a Rutgers student, said the recent weather in Jersey has been amazing because the sunshine always puts him in a great mood. I believe this is a fall story. He enjoys the hot weather because he loves immersing himself in the sun rays that provide him with organic vitamin D support. Personal, anecdotal stuff. Demarest loves the summer days. Actually, it might be a summer story, actually, because they allow him to lounge outside while reading his favorite books. Personal, anecdotal stuff. He also loves engaging in social activities because of the summer weather, that he would not be cold. I teach summer classes too. And then a quote: I can grow vegetables, attend outdoor festivals, and spend great outdoors with friends. Unlike the weather where it's constantly dark and makes icy roads dangerous to drive. So it's a nice, colorful statement there. Okay. So he's one of these many Rutgers students who say, here's your nut graph, say that the heat waves have been experiencing, that despite the heat waves they're experiencing, they're pleased when the temperatures stay below 80 degrees because it allows them to participate in social gatherings. I think this actually was a summer story, and it was actually a little bit cooler than normal, okay? So it basically allows them to actually just deal with the weather, okay? Or maybe even spring. So he's one of these many students that's actually kind of enjoying these kind of like warmer but not so warm days and how that's impacting them. Some students do not appreciate this time of year. So basically, some students don't appreciate this time of year because of the overwhelming heat and so comfortable and causes seasonal allergies. So basically, you might have like a mixed opinion story. Basically, that sort of thing. This is kind of what this is. Basically, that's fine too. You got to have a mixed opinion story, which is basically what this kind of alludes to. It says the heat waves, but they may not enjoy that, but they're also pleased by what they have. This is one of the reasons why they may not enjoy what's going on here. And brought back allergies. She does not like the summer weather fluctuates, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, some Rutgers students, and then you have a quote, some Rutgers students say they love adjusting to the warm weather because it provides them a sense of comfortability and freedom, okay? And then Kylie Gennady, a Rutgers senior, says he loves the hot summers because she enjoys walking on the beach and feeling the grains of sand between his toes. There's your environmental description that I was talking about that you might see more in the story than others, okay? All right, so that's an example of the story. You can see it follows that kind of format that I've been talking about with the teases and then the nut graph and then of course and then a quote providing that sort of color. I mean, you see this actually like in magazines. This is not how I expect you to write this, okay? But you'll see, I mean, this is where this kind of idea comes from. I'm really done with a slow computer today. So anyway, if you could just give me a second here. Frank Sinatra Has a Cold by Gay Talese. Now this story, like, it's funny. Esquire said it was the greatest story ever written. Well, they wrote it, but you can see like they have much longer grasp, but it's much more engaging, much more atmospheric. Okay, but they don't really tell you again the pull the hat out of the magic surprise what the story's about. And it's, the title is Frank Sinatra Has a Cold. Well, that's essentially the nut graph too. Essentially, Frank Sinatra, holding a glass of bourbon in one hand and a cigarette in the other, stood in the dark corner. The magazines have much longer paragraphs. I don't want you to write paragraphs this long. Okay. Anyway, just shows the setting. But he said nothing. He had been silent during much of the evening, except now in his private club, staring through the smoke and the silent darkness. There's some old-fashioned writing in here. Okay, it was a bad idea for have a conversation with at this point. This guy was like wealthy. It's basically say this guy was wealthy and well-known, one of the most famous people in the world. If you've never heard of him, he's a very famous singer, actor, etc. But he's unhappy. Why? Okay, Sinatra had been working on a film he now disliked. He could not wait to finish. He had people. We were 20-year-old Mia Farrow was on Twitter, by the way. People were he was like 50 at the time. People were like, what the hell? The connections to the mafia, all this stuff. But what was really bothering me was this: Frank Sinatra has a cold. So why is that a big deal? Because Sinatra with a cold is Picasso without paint, Ferrari without fuel, only worse. For the common cold robs Sinatra the uninsurable fuel, his voice, cutting into the core of his confidence, and affects not only his psyche, but it also caused him kind of psychosomatic nasal drip within the dozens of people who work for him. So basically, it's just kind of saying that all these terrible things are happening, but ironically, that's not what's getting him down. It's the cold, because the cold for a singer is like the worst thing you could possibly have. Okay. All right. So yeah, so that is actually like basically what you should be looking for, is that kind of like color and description in this type of a story. Okay. So but what I really want is like something that you shouldn't be like thrown off or think like, oh my God, I can't, that's too much. It is actually follows very much I hope you could hear all that because I'm actually freezing up again. Anyway, it's supposed to provide like, a very similar structure, but just kind of more of a kind of engaging opening. Okay, so let's go to the book actually now, and show how this is talked about in the book. And this is actually the last I'm going to ask you to read the book. It's interesting, like people have always asked me, like, why are we reading a book? And I've said this before, I've answered this before, but I don't want to like single anybody out, but I had a student who basically hadn't really done anything at all the first half of the semester, and then decided to do an assignment. And I looked at it and I kind of, it was, first of all, it was late. So it was way late. It was way beyond the deadline. So I can't even count it. But I saw the way it was written and I was thinking to myself, well, this person actually just read the book. And maybe he didn't even listen to my lectures. Maybe this person actually like would have at least gotten the style, because it was written in first person. It was written in kind of this colorful way that was actually like not really any kind of news writing, but more of like what I did in my summer vacation. So that's when I can tell you're not reading the book, because you're not just like watching the lectures, you're just not getting like anything, so I mean, if you at least read the book, you probably would have some just basic understanding. So here we are. Alternative leads, chapter 8. Okay, so basically they show you different ways you can actually like address the leads. Like I said, I think the reading materials I provided are probably a little slightly better than what's here. This actually provides some of the basics on what a lead is, like a summary lead and things like that. But it does actually get into the world of, say, delayed or buried leads. A buried or delayed lead is the most common type of alternative lead. Typically, it begins with an interesting example or anecdote that sets a story's theme. Then a nut graph, perhaps the third or fourth graph, states the central point and provides a transition to the body, moving the story to the general issue or problem. Like a traditional lead, it summarizes the topic and it may also explain what's important. So basically, there we have some validation right here. And then like right there, sometimes the tease can only be might only be like a 5-word sentence paragraph, and that's it. Call it a brush off. Pratt Institute is shortchanging its students by voting. This is actually I guess a opinion piece or something, or this is actually basically what the students are saying, but it's calling it basically kind of echoes or basically kind of bullhorns what they're saying in that first paragraph. Multi-graph leads, other news writers think of a lead as a unit of thought, where summary leads consist of 2 or 3 graphs that flow into each other as they were one. It didn't take Mark Tojo and Jay Chattel long to realize they had a aerodynamic pile of junk. And then it goes, they had paid $75,000 to a West Coast broker who advertised blah, blah, blah. It was a sight unseen. And then suddenly the big reveal comes. Now they're $500,000 worth later. They still need a facelift, but she flies, and they're basically making a lot of money. So they basically it's one of those classic rags to riches stories that basically you can use in this type of a lead. Please do not have a quotation lead. It talks suspensefully is what I'm getting at. A quotation lead is garbage. I'm sorry. A quote is only supposed to be some sort of vague, colorful expression of something. I've seen people, and I do not want to see a quotation lead. You want to make something that's based on a quote, turn it into an anecdote, a paraphrase, or something like that. Some people think that's actually like something featurey by putting in a quote. No, don't start that way. Quotes are vague. Quotes are not like supposed to be something that actually anchors a story. It's supposed to provide supplement. It's supposed to supplement what you're writing in the story. Okay. Now feature stories. So feature stories, again, feature stories are everywhere. They're in magazines, newspapers. They're also like on television news shows. Okay. Sometimes you'll see them. A lot of times they appear at the end. I mean, they're kind of buried like on websites now a little bit because they figure, I guess, people who might actually read the whole website or something like that or watch the whole television program will probably be more interested in a longer, more in-depth story or something like that. It's colorful. You see them usually a lot of times at the end of a news program. They'll might go out something, interview with something that's kind of quirky or whatever, like maybe some sort of a store in town that's actually got like sell some weird products or something like that. Okay. Again, that's the softer angle that you're looking for. And again, some of this stuff right here, you look at like some of the stuff that people look for. They mentioned some of it, fast food, parental instincts. That's like some stuff that actually like can provide like some fodder for like the anecdotes you're looking for. The lead of a feature story. The only requirement for the lead of a feature story is that it interests people, making them want to stay with the story to learn more. The story can start with either a summary type of lead or an alternative lead, and that's what I'm saying to do. Is basically like this is chapter 8. That would be your anecdotal lead is actually another phrase that I meant to use. Anecdotal lead, narrative lead, that sort of thing. It's an anecdote. The lead then rise to the solemn occasion represents. This says one cannot help but admire the prose of the nation marks the lives lost hearing. Once more, the leaden bells in mourning. Loved ones recited the names of the dead at Ground Zero, and a wounded and resilient America paused yesterday. Remember, calamitous day is about 9/11, obviously. When the terrorist explosions rumbled the summer thunder and people fell from the sky. This lead rises to the solemn occasion it represents. It is emotional, heavy, and poetic lead that embodies great sorrow and history. It causes people to pause and reflect. Which that's the intended effect. Okay. The body of the feature story, like I said, I mean, it's kind of typically follows like a typical pattern. Okay, I would say, but then again, as I've shown before, description plays like a bigger role in this sort of thing. I mean, there's different types of feature stories, profiles, personality features. I mean, with the weather story, that's what I'm trying to give you is actually like an opportunity to provide more personal and personality into the story itself, more emotion, that sort of thing. They could be like stuff that like deal with adventure, history. I used to, I used to do this. I used to like show people like a famous landmark. And then I showed you guys earlier this semester where the unfortunate incident in 1988 took place where the pledge drank himself to death. And that was actually kind of had like a featurish kind of angle to it, where basically, um, you know, they were looking at basically drinking on campus and how basically it is a thing and still a thing. And it's unfortunate, but and basically that was actually kind of almost anecdotal in itself, because it's kind of started with that whole idea of like, they interviewed people like me, like what the kind of drinking goes on campus and how it's affecting people here, and how, and so it wasn't just about, wasn't just an update story that would be like a typical hard news story on 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 uh on the actual tragedy, but something that kind of branches off on it and shows like what is the mood. All these, I also call these like mood pieces. What is the mood on campus? What is the flavor? What do people see? What is, what do they see in their eyes? How are they acting? Are they, um are they just basically something that are they just basically people who just, are just, crestfallen, they having a hard time getting through the day, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's actually this kind of story that we're looking for. Okay. Anyway, so that is the feature story assignment that I'll be doing 2 weeks. And now I want to go to again what I've been promising you to do and show you that actually what happened with this story really did exist. And that was the story about Marv Bronson. Dennis is based on a man by the name of Dennis Kozlowski. There were the details that were changed. I told you the names were changed, stuff like that. But there were some details that were changed because Dennis Kozlowski actually did go to jail. He was actually forced out in a way, but I think he actually quit, I believe. And he was the head of Tyco back in the day, late 2000s, when the economy went into the tank. And a lot of people were looking for people to blame on and they were looking at these people who were taking like these gigantic bonuses and things like that. So let's look at like what 60 Minutes had to say about this. And let me just make sure this does include the information that I'm looking for. Yep, there it is. That's the party.
Bonds pension funds, big time.
Go back to begin.
A year ago or so, the air was thick with tales of corporate scandal, lost pension funds, big time theft, and even bigger time prison sentences for the Enron gang. Then there was Dennis Kozlowski, CEO of Tyco, who was found guilty of, in effect, using Tyco's immense financial resources for what the prosecution described as his own personal piggy bank. You might remember the $6,000 shower curtain and stealing over $100 million from the company. Well, we wondered how the man who could whistle up a corporate jet on a whim or throw a $2 million birthday party was doing in his reduced circumstances. What's it like to go from king of the world to prisoner number 05A4820, serving 8 to 25 years behind bars? Once again, Dennis Kozlowski. Caught up with Dennis Kozlowski at Mid-State Correctional Facility in upstate New York. Guests include murderers, drug dealers, and pedophiles, and the odd multi-millionaire.
In my wildest imagination, when I would project myself into my late 50s and early 60s, where I would be or what I would be doing, if I make a list of 100 different places or 100 different things, here would never make that list.
He now earns $1 a day, mopping floors and slinging hash to his fellow inmates. In January, Kozlowski spent a week in hospital with a heart ailment and got to thinking. You've not thought publicly up till now. Why did you decide to do it?
When I was in the hospital in January, I was outside the emergency room feeling really uncomfortable, frightened. And that's when I really made the firm decision that I wanted to go through and talk to you at the time.
You became aware of your own mortality.
Very much so.
And you didn't want to leave this world
without at least an opportunity to talk about my side of the story to the extent that I can talk about it.
Agreed with one stipulation, that we would not include anyone else in this story. Because of an appeal, he'll not discuss the details of his case. He will say,
I believe in the judicial system. I think all that works. But in this case, the jury got it wrong.
That jury convicted him of 22 counts of grand larceny, conspiracy, and securities fraud. His trials occurred in the wake of a white-collar crime wave. WorldCom, town smelled blood. Accused of looting his company of hundreds of millions of dollars, living the life of a pasha at stockholders' expense. He was the living, breathing burden
Like I said, he went beyond a party.
of Wall Street's Gordon Gekko. Me. Up to a point. What's puzzling is why does a man who struggled so hard, so effectively to make it, become so careless, or stupid, or arrogant? Born in a tenement on the wrong side of the tracks in Newark, New Jersey, Kozlowski worked his way through school.
I played guitar in a band. I worked in a pharmacy. I worked in a car wash. I had 2 or 3 jobs going at any given time.
Where you came from, there weren't that many options.
No. Growing up in Newark, New Jersey at the time, you never thought of yourself growing up to become a CEO.
Started at Tyco, then a small New Hampshire manufacturing company as an accountant, making $28,000 a year, and worked his way up to CEO. He became known as deal-a-day Dennis, constantly acquiring new companies and building Tyco from a $40 million company into a $40 billion conglomerate.
Would like to become, all things equal, a $100 billion company.
Wall Street could not get enough of the young, aggressive CEO. He also began making staggering amounts of money, among the top earning CEOs in the country.
We had a pay-for-performance culture at Tyco, so most of the money I earned was in the appreciation of Tyco stock.
1 year you made $170 million.
I'm not sure 170, but I made over 100 million. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. More money than
10 million here, 10 million there, who cares? What's it like to earn that kind of money?
It's a way of keeping score, I guess.
Keeping score meant teaming up with the masters of the universe. $30 million to build a mansion in Boca Raton, acquiring homes in Nantucket and Colorado, and just loose change $16 million for Endeavor, a vintage yacht. Wealth meant one thing, social acceptance another. He and his second wife, Karen Mayo, spent millions on painting. He joined the board of the Whitney Museum. For a pied-à-terre in New York, he had Tyco buy a $19 million apartment and decorated it with $11 million worth of stuff. The poor kid from Newark was stepping out on Fifth Avenue. Would Dennis Kozlowski a few years ago even contemplate going to Europe to buy old master paintings?
No, absolutely not. It came with earning the amount of money I was earning at the time.
Was it your idea, or were you invited to join the board of the Whitney?
It was not my idea at all. I was invited to join the board, and I never made a board meeting.
So you were invited because they like having really rich guys on the board.
I assume it wasn't for my knowledge of art.
But it was art that would lead to his undoing. Manhattan District Attorney's Office was investigating galleries that were helping customers avoid sales taxes. Kozlowski had purchased $13 million worth of paintings, including a Renoir and Monet, for the Tyco apartment. But prosecutors said he had some of them shipped to Tyco's offices in New Hampshire, a state without sales tax. They were then trucked back to New York. In 2002, Manhattan District Attorney's Office indicted Kozlowski for evading over $1 million in sales tax, and he resigned as CEO. That was only the beginning. The Tyco board investigated its CEO's behavior and made public a report that was devastating. Kozlowski's excesses were revealed in excruciating detail. Decorations for the New York apartment became classic tabloid headlines, mocking the CEO's taste and his greed. $50,000 doggy umbrella stand, and the ultimate symbol of his downfall, that $6,000 shower curtain. The coverage was really punishing.
That was horrible.
As overblown as the coverage may have been, you signed off on those.
I signed off on a decorator to decorate the Tyco apartment, and beyond that, that was my involvement. The first time I heard about that shower curtain, the first time was after I was out of the company, and I read about it in a newspaper, and I was calling around asking, "Where's the shower curtain?" But to this day, I wouldn't know it if it fell on me. So
then there was
Here you go. Here's the party.
40th birthday party for Kozlowski's wife Karen in Sardinia. It was togas galore. 4-day festival of flesh. Jimmy Buffett was flown in for the music, and guests were treated to a special cake, an anatomically correct woman with exploding breasts. The cost was over $2 million. Since Kozlowski claimed it was in part a work retreat cycle for the Pabst bill.
Different
It's
again.
embarrassing for you though when they slide that tape. It's this kind of orgy going on.
Horrible. It's over the top. I was taken aback by it, but I smiled and worked my way through it. Wanted the night end as fast as I could.
Donald Trump called your behavior tacky.
Thank you. Thank you from Donald Trump.
From Donald Trump.
Oh, well, he would know.
Those excesses may have been
That was before he was president.
tacky, but tacky doesn't send you to jail. Far more serious was the other.
Well, anyway, that's I just want to make sure. So that didn't have all the details of the party. That was actually on a website called smokinggun.com, thesmokinggun.com. I believe that had all the details that Bill actually extracted the information from. So, all right, so that's what we have. So you have a new discussion point that'll be for the weather story. You have the old discussion point, which will expire today. That's for the data journalism assignment. So please remember that, you should respond to that too, because we were looking for student reaction for that. You also have another discussion point that one of our students, thank you, Janice, for putting up for major assignment, which is a good idea, trying to get information that way. So you have that. You have the obviously data journalism assignment due. Megalomania assignment rewrite was due last week, and so we got that out of the way. And now we have the feature assignment due in 2 weeks, and like I said, there'll be a rewrite on that. And then of course, this is all on Canvas. We have the major assignment due. By the time of this taping, I should have everybody's proposal. Okay, so or it's by the posting, I should say. Remember, if you actually do not give me a if you did not give me a proposal on time, means a full grade deduction on the major assignment. Okay, I had some issues the last time with that, so I had to impose that rule. Okay, all right. I hate to be that way, but I just remember that deadlines are a very important part of journalism, and that's part of what I have to teach here. Okay, so all right, if you have any kind of like hold up or anything like that, I feel like people maybe are sometimes scared or maybe even ashamed to like kind of reach out to me and for help. I'm actually pretty, believe it or not, very flexible about things as long as people just communicate with me, and that's it. All right. Well, thanks very much, guys, and I will be talking to you.